to Reading on the Rock.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Reading on the Rock here at Covenant United Methodist Church. I'm Reverend Ann Kemper, and tonight we continue our series of children's books about music. Because music is a beautiful and fun and diverse way to express our feelings, especially feelings of praise and thanks to God. And tonight's story takes a closer look at the cello.
Hello, my name is Kathleen, and I'm going to read a book to you called The Cello of Mr. O by Jane Cutler, illustrated by Greg Couch, and published, let's take a look, Dutton Children's Book in New York. I want to tell you a little bit about where the idea of this book came from. There is actually a man named Vedar Smalovic who played his cello during the Sarajevo War 22 times for each person that was killed near him. And this story, The Cello of Mr. O, is about a man who did something similar. And it kind of shows us that the human spirit is pretty, resilient, or can come back through any little act of kindness. Now, I don't play the cello, but I love to smile at people and say hello. Maybe you do too. Any little act of kindness can bring someone a little bit of joy and sunlight in their life. The Cello of Mr. O. Here we are, surrounded and under attack. My father and most of the other fathers and older brothers, even some of the grandfathers, have gone to fight. So we stay, children and women, the old and the sick, managing as best we can. I am afraid almost all the time. At night, from my window, I can see the white trails of tracer fire and the orange flash of mortars in the sky. I pretend I'm watching shooting stars and meteors. The streets of our city are littered with bricks, dust, and broken glass. We have no heating oil. Last winter, we slept in our clothes in the kitchen, next to a sheet metal stove Papa put together before he left. We used up all our wood. If something doesn't change by the time winter comes, we will have to burn furniture and books to keep warm. Food is scarce, of course, and water. We collect rainwater in bowls and buckets, and we go to distribution centers and bring water home. Some people carry their heavy containers of water in shopping carts, some in wheelbarrows. In winter, many of us use sleds. Last week, Mama and I saw a woman hauling water in a wheelchair. Each Wednesday at 4, the relief truck comes to a street right outside our square. We wait in line to receive soap, cooking oil, canned fish, and flour. Nothing is as it was. Shops, cars, and apartments have been destroyed. Schools are closed. The electricity is usually out, and there is no gas at all. Even the telephones don't work. Many people have left. Some, like Mama's friend Maria, stay because they have no place else to go. And some, like my mother, have decided to stay no matter what. Mama can't stand the idea of Papa coming back to nothing. She wants us to be here. Mama sighs. This is not the first time in history that such a thing has happened, she tells me. It may not be the first time it has happened, but it is the first time it has happened to me. I am angry almost all the time. My friends and I stay close to home, usually inside our large apartment building, sitting under the stairs. We pass the time playing cards and word games, reading books, drawing, talking. We imagine what we would have if we could eat whatever we wanted. Sometimes we can't sit still a minute longer, and we run through the halls laughing and making noise. Then Mr. O flings open his door. "Quiet, you kids," he shouts, as if kids were a bad thing. When the relief truck comes at 4 on Wednesdays, everyone goes into the street. It feels like a party, being outside with so many other people for a change. Even Mr. O stands in line. But he doesn't chat. He just waits, looking away from the rest of us. "A thinker," my mother says quietly, nodding in his direction. "A thinker," her friend Maria says in a mocking tone. Maria doesn't agree with my mother. Neither do I. Mr. O isn't thinking. He's just being unfriendly. We children don't like Mr. O. Whenever one of us can find a paper bag, we blow it up with air and then pop it right outside his apartment door. It sounds just like a shell exploding. We laugh and run, imagining his fear. When he's not waiting in line for supplies with the rest of us, Mr. O plays his cello. It's a fine cello, one of the best. My father, who loves music too, who plays tender songs and lively tunes on the harmonica, told me this about the cello of Mr. O. The front and the back of that excellent cello were carved out of German fiddleback maple and hand-rubbed with a special polish made in France. And the neck of the cello was made of mahogany from Honduras, and the fingerboard of ebony, probably from Ceylon, he said. As for the bow, my father continued, it was carved out of a soft wood that grows in Brazil. The ivory on its tip came from Africa. People all over the world had to cooperate to make the cello of Mr. O, my father said. My father told me about Mr. O, too. When he was young, he traveled around the world playing his cello in great halls for hundreds of people who cheered when he finished and threw flowers. If my father knew about the paper bags, he would be angry. But Papa's far away, fighting somewhere in the mountains. He has taken his harmonica and all his warm clothes with him, and we have no idea when we will see him again. It's 4:00 in the afternoon, a dull fall Wednesday. My friend and Elena and I are playing jacks under the stairs. We hear the supply truck roar up, but we're lazy, and for once we don't rush outside to wait with the others. We hear the footsteps of people leaving their apartments, leaving the building. We hear the murmur of talk and laughter, and then we hear the rocket hit. The truck is destroyed. Some people we know are badly hurt. Now, even though we clear away the rubble and smooth over the ground, supplies will not be brought here. We are too easy a target, they tell us. Now we will have to walk for miles to get anything, and nothing will happen to make even one day a week any better than the others. But on the first Wednesday after the rocket, at exactly 4:00, Mr. O appears all dressed up, carrying his cello, carrying a chair. He marches out into the middle of the square where everyone can see him. He sets up his chair. He takes out his cello. He tightens his horsehair bow and rubs it with rosin. He takes a deep breath and he plays. The music of Bach, Mama tells me, her face shining as we listen to the complicated music, the powerful and reassuring notes. How he plays, our Mr. O, as if he were on the stage of a grand, warm hall, playing for people who will throw flowers, as if he were not alone in the center of a deserted square in a besieged city where even a relief truck will no longer come. They will kill him, Maria cries fearfully. They would not bother to kill an old man playing a cello, Mama says. But I'm not so sure, because the music of the cello makes us feel less angry, and the courage of the cellist makes us less afraid. If they guess it could be reason enough for them to want to stop the music, which feeds us as truly as the supplies brought by the truck did. Mr. O does not play only on Wednesday. Every day at 4 o'clock, he and his cello appear. One day, after he has started playing, Mr. O gets a cramp in his leg. He leans the cello against his chair and hobbles about, shaking his leg. We hear a fusillade of exploding shells. We see clouds of black smoke. Finally, when the smoke clears, we see that the cellist is unharmed, but all that remains of the cello is splintered wood and tangled strings. What will feed us now, I wonder? It is the very next day that I find the brown paper bag. It's a small one and crumpled. I smooth it out as best I can. Then I put it under Papa's heavy dictionary and leave it there all night. In the morning, I choose the best crayons I have from the cigar box, where I keep them. Most of them are just stubs of crayons. Still, I have many different colors left. Carefully, on the crinkly paper bag, I draw. I draw a picture of Mr. O in his dark suit, sitting on a chair, playing a cello. And then I draw bright flowers falling all around him. When I finish, I take the picture and tiptoe up to Mr. O's apartment. I press my ear against the door and listen. Silence. Carefully, quietly, I slip the picture underneath the door, and then I run. To everyone's surprise, promptly at 4 o'clock that afternoon, out of the building comes Mr. O, carrying a chair. He sees me at the window and he bows to me and smiles. Then from the pocket of his coat, he draws a small shiny object, a harmonica. From then on, for 1 hour every single day, Mr. O sits in the square and plays his harmonica. The melody sounds sad and sweet and small and very different from the grand songs Mr. O played on his cello. It is Bach nevertheless, Mama says. The music makes us feel happy, and the courage of the harmonica player makes us less afraid. And that's the story of the cello of Mr. O. Maybe each one of us, in some small way, can make someone feel happy and less afraid.
We just heard a story about how a man played music on his cello to bring hope and happiness to people. And today we're going to get a demonstration on a real cello. And here to give us that is our friend and neighbor, Kendra Denson. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here.
Please tell us about this beautiful instrument.
So the cello, the history behind the cello is they were made initially back in Italy, and I can't remember. I think it was the 1700s. And then over the course of time, the instrument has evolved into what looks like this. It used to not look like this back when they were first made. It's actually a German cello. So the Italian cellos and German cellos, most people are familiar with them, but there's also English, French, Chinese, American. So we'll start with the end. This part, what's sticking out is called the end pin, and the end pin is used to adjust the height of the cello and the angle. It's very, very sharp, so it's able to stay in the floor of the carpet really easily.
Probably helps your back too.
Yes.
You'd be leaning too forward or sitting up too high.
Yes, yeah. So it's always, sometimes I have to keep adjusting to figure out what exactly height I need it. This is the tailpiece, and it holds the strings. This is called the lower bout. These are the F holes, and the F holes produce the sound. So while I'm talking about sound, there's a piece in here called the sound post, and it gets adjusted so that it brings out the best tone and for the instrument. This is the bridge. The bridge also holds the strings. And then we come to the strings, and the entire instrument is what allows like the creative beauty to come across, but the strings are what kind of dictates what happens. So there's 4 strings, and the lowest string is the C, and then we have the G, and then the D and the A. This is the fingerboard here, and then we have up here the peg box, which holds the pegs for tuning, and then this is the nut that holds the strings in place so that you can tune.
That's a lot of pieces.
Yes, yeah, and those are just the basic, the lower bout, and then this is the upper bout. So.
And it's funny that we have words like bridge and nut, words that have other meanings too, but they're applied here, and I can see how that is sort of a bridge.
Yes, yeah. The bow is made from horsehair, and then the wood is, I believe it's Pernambuco wood. It's a Brazilian wood. And then you have, this is called the frog, and the tip is here. And this might sound strange, but my cello and bow have names. So this is Ruby.
Oh.
And then this is Pearl, because there's mother of pearl here.
Oh, okay.
So they always travel together, and like the kids know the cello is Ruby.
And how did Ruby get her name?
It was just kind of a whimsical name that came to mind. The cello was made in the late 19th century, and so I wanted to find names that were created during that time. I don't think Ruby, that was a common name back in the late 19th century, but she has an old soul, and she's very sweet and very, the tone is very soft and sweet. And then I have another cello, and her name is Dolores, and she's very, like, when she wants to make a statement, that's the cello I use. So yeah, so the kids know Ruby and Dolores, and so yeah, so it's fun. It's fun.
Great.
So.
Now tell us, how did you learn to play the cello? What's your story?
So it's very interesting. I started playing the cello when I was 9 years old. So I wanted to play either the violin or the flute, because the kids that age who had started playing violin and flute, they could take their instruments out on the school bus and play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and people would look in awe and say, "Oh my gosh, how do you know where to put your fingers?" And stuff. And so I actually went to a school. I was the only black kid at the school, and this was back in the 1970s, and so I wanted to really be liked. And I had this big afro, and here I'm with all these white kids. And I knew that if I played the violin or flute, that would allow people to like, oh my gosh, she's so cool. Anyway, so I wanted to try out the violin, and the teacher at the time, her name was Mrs. Roxon, she said, "Oh, you know what? I think you'd make an amazing little cello player." And that was not the plan, come home with this instrument. So obviously I came home with the instrument. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I never practiced. And then it came to a point where I had a little accident with the cello. I dropped it. And my father said, "Well, you know, she doesn't practice, she doesn't take care of the instrument, you know, just don't have her play it." But I really believe that it was the Spirit of the living God when I was 9 years old that said this to me. Go ahead and just practice for 1 week. Do exactly what the teacher tells you, the 30 minutes, and see what happens. And so I did that, and then Mrs. Roxon was like, you're very talented. And you hear that reinforcement, that positive reinforcement, it causes you to go on as a kid. Yeah. So then all of a sudden, when I was 10 years old, I started playing in these like solo festivals, and I was invited to play in all county orchestra, and I didn't know what this meant, but I was sitting the very first chair of the cello section. It's called being the principal cellist, and they would just talk about it, the fact that I was the principal cellist, and being Black as a principal cellist, and then from there it just the instrument became a part of me, and I became a part of the instrument, and then I played in the RPYO in high school.
Tell us what RPYO.
I'm sorry, the Rochester Philharmonic Youth Orchestra.
Oh, okay.
And then I went to college and I played. I was a music minor, and I won prizes, monetary prizes for being a cellist. And then as I've gotten older, there's not a lot of opportunities to play. I mean, there's community orchestras, but life gets in the way. So I would play occasionally. A lot of times I'll be asked to do a wedding or funeral or something. And then of course I'll sometimes play in church. So I've been playing for 44 years. Oh. And I just tell people, your friends, if you choose between your friends and your instrument, when you're a child, your instrument will always be with you. Ruby and I will always be together. But your friends move on in their life. So that's the story.
Yeah, beautiful. And you still take lessons now.
Yes.
As an adult.
Yes.
Even after 40 years of playing.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So part of the reason why I tell people I went back to studying cello is because I needed to be held accountable. So I would practice. It's like if I study, then then I'll practice. But I have a wonderful, wonderful teacher. Her name is Joan Kinsella. She's with Eastman Community Music School, and it's different as an adult studying, but I still treat it the same way that I did when I was growing up. I have to do scales, etudes, solos, prepare for recitals.
Do the homework.
Yeah, but I think one really cool experience that I had last year, I had encountered some racial profiling at Eastman, and Joan and I came together to address it. And Joan is Caucasian, and we came together to address it. And I had a chance to make a statement about it, and I made it through music. So Joan and I were invited to play at the James Weldon Johnson estate, Lift Every Voice and Sing. James Weldon Johnson wrote that, and we were invited to play Lift Every Voice and Sing. And so I had an arrangement written for 2 cellos and commissioned. So the gentleman who wrote it, I'm drawing a blank with his name. His first name was Cremain. So Cremain wrote it, and then Joan and I, we put our edits in it. So that will go into the Yale Library in the James Weldon Johnson, where they keep the special.
Like a special collection?
Yes, a special collection.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
but it was very cathartic and healing for me, and it was a great opportunity for a Black cellist and her teacher, who's white, to come together, make our statement, and with an amazing piece written for two cellos, and showing the fight that we, not fight, but yes, it was a fight, because I'm fighting for my race and ethnicity and who I am as a person, but to come along, have her come alongside me and do that with me, so.
Well, and to lift your voice and play.
Yes.
And the words are, but that song was a perfect choice for that.
Yeah.
So, just to conclude a little bit, when you play music, what does that do to your soul, and does that help you express your praise to God?
Yeah, so I might start crying. So, I think that when I had that revelation when I was 9 years old, first of all, I did think, is that normal for a 9-year-old to think like that? Like, if you practice, then let's see what happens. I think that was from the Spirit of the living God, and I think that he knew that I would need the cello for my soul as I've gotten older. And I even had a former teacher say to me, I've worked with some very arrogant cellists, and she said, but you are not arrogant. But you need it for your soul. And so if I feel sad, I sit down and I'll start playing. And I try to, my first and foremost goal is to play to the glory of God. And so every time I sit down to the cello, I always thank him for enabling me to play and entrusting me to play. But it has been very healing. Sometimes I'll just start crying when I'm playing. And I don't think that, I'm not crying because I'm producing beautiful music. I'm crying because he is doing the work. I'm just the vessel that he does it through. So.
Oh, that's beautiful. And as you're practicing your cello, you're practicing your faith. It's a lifelong practice to continue to build those faith practices.
Yes. So.
What would you say to young children and children of color, particularly, about music and what that could be, either as a profession or for just personal enjoyment or praise and expression?
So children of color, when I was in school, I would have to say that I was in the county probably the only Black cello player or cellist when I was 9 years old. So that was a big thing. Now I see more young children of color who are playing the instrument, which is very meaningful to me. I would say, as far as a Black cellist, if talking to other kids who look like me, I would say that if presented with an instrument, a lot of teachers will say to a young person of color, "Oh, you would be great with the trumpet or the drums or the saxophone," and they're not looking at music from the perspective of the broad aspect of music and what a Black musician can do. They pigeonholed us into jazz, blues, but we have so much more. We have the right to play classical music and play violin and cello, and instead of being pigeonholed. I mean, I don't see it often, but it's still there. So, and then just with kids overall, I would say, when you choose an instrument, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard learning the instrument, but do what Mrs. Roxon said. Practice for 30 minutes, practice for 15 minutes, 30 minutes. And then all of a sudden you'll realize, oh my gosh, I can actually play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And then over time the instrument will become a part of you and you'll become a part of the instrument. And I always tell kids, when you start an instrument, don't quit. Because like I said before, your friends your friendships ebb and flow. They're there and then they're not, but your instrument is always, always with you, and can really be calming, healing. God can speak through it and speak to you through it. And so I always just tell people, don't quit, because you will most likely regret. You'll most likely regret doing that. So I'm going to be playing two pieces. One is called I Love You, Lord, today, and it's a heartfelt expression about how I feel about God. And then the other piece is called Give Me Jesus. And Give Me Jesus kind of goes along with what you had shared with me about the children's book. It's sad, but it's also hopeful. The other thing I want to mention is I wore all black for a specific purpose. When you go to like the RPO or Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra, or any type of event where musicians are performing, you'll see them wearing all black, and it's called concert black. So I wanted to wear concert black so you can see exactly what you would see if you went to hear the Philharmonic play. Now, as an aside, the bling up here is not part of concert black, so you would not see that, but you'll see the musicians in all black. So that's the reason why I wore that today. So I will start with I Love You, Lord, today. And then again, this next piece is called Give Me Jesus, and it's African American spiritual.
I'm so glad that God spoke to you when you were 9 years old and kept you going.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, and thank you, Ruby and Pearl, for demonstrating tonight and for sharing your beautiful story.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. And kids or adults, anyone watching, please send us some comments. Put them in the comment section if you'd like to comment on this segment.
Thank you, Ms. Denson, for showing us how the cello makes a beautiful music. And thank you, Kathi, for reading that inspiring story. Would you please pray with me? Thank you, God, for giving us the gift of music as a way to show our feelings and to praise and thank you. Amen. And so from all of us here at Covenant United Methodist Church, good night.
Reading on the Rock is presented by Covenant United Methodist Church in Rochester, New York.